on the field. The Armada launch into their first season in the NASL, looking for an attendance record and looking to serve notice to the league that they are a force to be reckoned with in their first season in the league. And right out of the gate, there it is. You couldn't script it any better. Jamal Johnson scoring from distance.
I'm Mike Lyons, your host for another oral history interview for the Jacksonville Broadcasters Association. The association's purpose is to preserve the rich history and contributions of the area's radio, television, and broadcasting industries. The association is open to those past and present broadcasters in our area, those affiliated with the region's broadcasting industry, and entities who have served this region's proud broadcasting heritage. We welcome students who are focusing their careers on the broadcasting industries. It's September 2023. Our guest today is Cole Pepper, a former longtime Jacksonville broadcaster and media icon. He's been on radio, he's been on television, he's been on everything. Cole, thanks for stopping by today with us.
Thank you, my pleasure. I'm not sure icon, I don't know that I've gotten to that status yet, but I appreciate it.
Some of us definitely feel that way. Okay, I usually start these out. I say, let's go back to high school. You're Shawnee Mission East High School.
That's right.
In Shawnee Mission, Kansas, early 90s. And I asked any ideas of being a broadcaster then, but I understand yours started way earlier than that.
Yeah, when I was, back in, let's take it back to around 1978, 79, 80. The Royals are great in Kansas City. George Brett's leading the way. And I am fascinated by baseball, of playing it and watching the games. And I decided about 6 years old, I was either going to be a professional baseball player or a baseball announcer. Then they started throwing curveballs, and my decision was pretty much made for me. Still played up through high school, but at that point, I really knew that I wanted to be a broadcaster. My first love was to be a baseball play-by-play guy, and then you sort of start seeing the other things you can do in sports broadcasting, and it went from there.
Tell me about the wooden spoon.
The wooden spoon.
You tell me you'd go around
well,
with it?
Yeah, so there were all kinds of devices. That was one of them when I was, maybe 6, 7 years old at Thanksgiving dinner, our big family gathering somewhere in Hutchinson, Kansas, or Harrington, Kansas, and all my mom's siblings and their kids and grandma and everybody. I would go around interviewing people with a wooden spoon or a spatula or a whisk or something during Thanksgiving dinner or just before while we're all waiting for the turkey to come out. I would do interviews. I have no idea what I was asking at that point, probably annoying most of my uncles and aunts, but my mom still says that she knew at that point that I was going to have a microphone in my hand.
Well, that's pretty interesting. And then cassette tapes. I heard you did some play-by-play yourself when you were a youngster.
Yeah, junior high and high school, I would take a cassette recorder and I would record myself doing play-by-play off games off TV, or I had a little Nerf hoop that you could hang on the top of your door. So on my bedroom door, I took masking tape and taped out a basketball court, basically a half court with a three-point line and the lane. And I would play with a little rubber ball and play a basketball game. And those years it was the Kansas City Kings, and I would be taking on an NBA All-Star team, and I would play both parts and do play-by-play as I was playing. So if I missed a shot, well, the play-by-play guy says he misses the shot. So I loved being a part of games, playing, broadcasting, being around the games and the excitement and the unknown of what was going to happen. Now we call it the ultimate reality show. There weren't reality shows back then, but not knowing what was going to happen and seeing competition always really got me.
Morris is third in the Arena Football League in touchdown passes, fourth in efficiency. He has taken a major step forward this season to become one of the star players in the AFL here in 2013. Harvey is the motion man for Morris. Little jump ball, and there it is. Touchdown, Jacksonville. Jerron Harvey, the Jacksonville native, who capped off. In
high school, did you have anything to do with broadcasting in high school?
Yeah, we had a setup. We had 5 high schools in my district, the Shawnee Mission School District. So every 5 weeks, each school would produce a half-hour show, a news show. I was fortunate enough my senior year to take the class that produced it. And we tried out, and I was chosen as the anchor. So I was the anchor for that show.
You'd had plenty of practice by then.
Off camera, but this was, here we were on the real cameras. Yeah. KSME, Shawnee Mission East. And it was a public access show, and so we did that. Then my next semester, I basically helped produce that show. So that really whetted my appetite. I had some other opportunities too. I had a friend of our family whose dad was a photog at a local TV station, went with him to a Royals game to see how he covered a Royals game back then. So that was great. So I was always looking for chances to get closer to it.
On to the University of Kansas. That's a pretty good school for journalism,
Yep.
if I'm not mistaken.
Absolutely.
You went there.
Yeah, and my whole family had gone there, and I looked at other places, but ultimately KU was the place for me. And
How far away was that from your home?
45 minutes.
Oh, wow.
So I could get home if I needed to. But the other big benefit there was at the broadcasting department, there was a sports broadcasting professor named Tom Hedrick, who had been a play-by-play guy for Major League Baseball and the NFL and college sports. And so to have a guy who had been in the business, who had gone through it all, teaching the class, I mean, I improved leaps and bounds. I
What
went
a mentor. That was amazing.
great mentorship there. A lot of great broadcasters have come out of there, including Brian Sexton here in Jacksonville, Kevin Harlan, and others. Some terrific broadcasters because of that kind of professional experience that was passed down.
And you got some great experience at the University of Kansas.
Yeah, I did. With both the some internships I had covering the Royals. I kind of lucked my way into a couple of writing gigs, first with the Associated Press and then with the Kansas City Star. Also had internships doing pregame, postgame show for the Royals and helping cover the Chiefs as well for the local cable outlet channel in Lawrence. Was able to be the mic holder in the locker room after the game, which really helped give me kind of some more experience. My first NFL coverage experience was covering the Chiefs, quarterback by Joe Montana. That was pretty good.
And you were the sports director at the radio station at the school.
Yeah, the student station there, sports director, KJHK. Maybe a 50-watt signal. You couldn't hear it much beyond campus at all. But the great thing about that student experience is that about 3/4 of the home baseball games were broadcast live there by students, and about half of the women's basketball games were broadcast live, and they were the only ones that anybody was hearing. Now we were also broadcasting the men's basketball games and the men's football games.
Baseball too.
And baseball. But the ones that were the only place that they were going to be heard were about half of those baseball games and women's basketball games. So when you're the only guy who's covering this thing in a broadcast medium, as a student, it elevates the expectation. And I think it showed me what you need to do from a preparation standpoint on play-by-play.
So all these things that you were doing, just great training for the future.
Yeah, and I think one of the great lessons I learned there is not to just do one thing well, and that's you've got to know a lot of things, and you can be good at one thing, but you better be decent at a bunch of other things, because when I was looking for jobs coming out of college, I was looking for baseball play-by-play jobs. Well, I didn't get one, but a job came open in Jacksonville, Florida, for a sports radio station that was starting up, and it needed, they wanted an update guy and a show producer, and I had a little bit of experience with both of those. I had enough of a tape that I could send them,
Right.
And that's why I wound up in Jacksonville in 1996.
What was your first job out of college, or you had one while you were in college?
Yeah.
You mentioned an internship with a radio station that carried the Royals.
Yep, that's right. That was 61 Country, WDAF, for 1 year. And then the next year, the rights shifted over to KMBZ Radio. And so I wound up going from an internship with one station to producing the pregame and postgame show on the weekends for the Royals affiliate the next year. And that was sort of like a job with training wheels, because I had some veterans in radio around me who could help me and give me a little bit of a tip here and there. But the expectation wasn't that we were producing, high-level broadcasts. It was just a pregame, postgame talk show, basically.
Right.
30 minutes beforehand, maybe an hour afterwards. And so that was great experience.
And I understand you also wrote for the AP at
Yep.
that time,
Yeah.
for KU Sports.
Yeah, I was a KU.
And the Kansas City Star.
That's
You
right.
worked with them too?
Yeah, and I never thought of myself as wanting to be a sports writer back in those days. But looking back on it, that was so valuable for a couple of reasons. One, it taught me journalism. Like, that's when you don't have video to rely on, you've got to paint the picture and you've got to write it. And so really learning what journalism and the expectations from a wire service editor or a newspaper editor, what they wanted, you learned that in a hurry what was important, and the process of writing has served me well all the way throughout. As broadcasters go, I think I'm a decent writer, and that's a skill that I think is important for all young broadcasters.
Right.
The Jaguars are in Tennessee to face the Titans tomorrow. Doug Peterson has been saying he's approaching this game as one in a playoff chase. Technically, that's true. But let's take a closer look at how the Jaguars can win the AFC South and earn a
You had to feel like you were in royal heaven, covering the Royals and KU sports. That was your favorite. You had to love that.
Yeah, it was pretty good. The thing I did adjust to is also, which has sort of changed now, and it's kind of gone back, the pendulum has swung a little bit. Back in those days, the expectation was, don't be a fan. If you're a broadcaster or a writer, be a journalist. You're there to cover the thing. Now, especially on sports radio, you see a lot and hear a lot of fans. And even on TV, you see a lot of fans.
Homers. They
It's
called
a homer.
it, right?
Now, listen, it is important to know who you're talking to. Knowing your audience is important. Knowing what they care about.
They're homers too. So.
Well, and they should be. They're fans.
Yeah.
That's what they should be.
Right.
For me, it's still uncomfortable to go in and try to homer up a broadcast to somebody. You can feel the excitement and the energy of the positives, but at the same time, you have to recognize the negatives.
Right.
If all you want is the positives, what would have happened during the Urban Meyer era? What were your expectations have been? And I was tough on Urban, kind of from the beginning, but if you just wanted somebody who just thinks, yay, 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 home team, you're not ever going to get to the point where, now you can have Doug Peterson in as the head coach, right?
Right.
Or if there was no blowback from the public as a result of what they're seeing in the media or in social media, who knows if that
In
changes
journalism, there are two sides to every story. Every time. That's what we did every day.
Yes.
I spent
Yeah.
30, what the Gold guys that knew I was in news at the golf course, my nickname is Fake News. I said, I never did fake news. I spent 39 years finding both sides of the story every day.
Yeah, and you can call it fake news if you don't actually practice journalism, right? That's the problem. If you just lean to one side, always search for the truth. Always look for the truth of what's happening there. Now listen, if you're doing a feature on a high school athlete, that's generally going to be a positive build-up situation. Fine. You're talking about professional athletes and even college kids who are getting NIL money now. Look for the truth.
Yeah, definitely.
That should be the underpinning of everything you do as a broadcaster.
Right. You wound up coming to Jacksonville. I don't recall the year. How did that come about?
In 1996, the guy who worked at the cable station in Lawrence, who I helped out at the Chiefs games, he was the executive producer of the Chiefs radio broadcast, a guy by the name of Joe Carnes. And there were two KU guys here in Jacksonville working at the time in radio, Bill Riley and Brian Sexton. Brian had gotten the Jaguars job. Bill was doing the pregame, postgame show for the Jaguars and was the sports director at WOKV. And they were launching a new all-sports station, AM 600 The Ball. And I don't know if it was Bill, Brian, or both, suggested to call Joe about seeing if he would like to come down and be the producer of an afternoon talk show and do the updates, the sports updates. Mm-hmm. Well, Joe wasn't ready to make a move. Things were going well for him there. And he said, but what about Cole? And I had met both Bill and Brian once each previously. Mm-hmm. Never had any long ongoing conversations with them, which I probably should have. That would be advice for young Culpepper. Hey, keep those conversations going. I lucked out and it turned out okay. But I got the call then and interviewed, came down. They gave me the job as the producer and doing updates.
On
November.
The Ball.
Yeah, on the ball.
Is that the first sports radio station in Jacksonville?
No, 930 was first. It was at the time WNZS.
Right.
And that was the first one.
That's right.
And we were coming in.
Jay Solomon was a part of that because he's a legendary radio guy here.
And I'll tell you a story about Jay. And Hall of Fame Jacksonville broadcaster, right?
Right.
I'm walking out of a Jaguars game, one of the first Jaguars games after I moved down. I think it may have been against the Bengals. And we're walking out, and Jay's next to me, and we're kind of chatting. And he says, I think it's really clever what you do. Just going by one name, Culpepper. And I kind of stopped. I said, Jay, thank you, but it's two. It's Cole and Pepper. And he stopped, and he said, Well, that's good too. But Jay was doing the JU games at the
But
time.
an easy name for people to remember.
In the South especially, right? One with Culpeper.
Yeah.
Jay was doing the JU games when I first got here.
Right.
And I wound up, right after I got down, getting the job doing the public address announcing for JU basketball. So we were able to connect on that level.
And we are live outside TIAA Bank Field, where in just a few minutes, the U.S. women's national team will be playing Costa Rica in a friendly. It's really the final stage of a three-leg victory tour after the women won the World Cup this past year. A lot of the same faces you'll see there, and of course, a lot of fans in our area excited to see, and I found some of the fans who are excited to see some of the members of the U.S.
What was it like working at that first all sports station? And you worked with some people, I believe, there that were involved in sports radio early on, and some people that had been in broadcasting quite a bit here in Jacksonville. Worked with some great people there.
Yeah, Bill Riley and Scott Jackson did the morning show. We had a list of guys on what we call the bullpen from 10 a.m. to noon. Each day was somebody different. Lex Terry and Sam Kavaris were on Mondays.
Right.
Pete Prisco was on Tuesdays. I think Scott Jackson wound up doing the Wednesday show. Matt Hayes did a show on Thursday, and then Dan Hicken did Friday, just that 10 to noon. So I got to meet those guys in a setting like that early on. So I got to sort of start building my Jacksonville sports media network at that point.
Ballou, Fisher, Lamb have anything to do with that?
So Rick Ballou was the afternoon host, and that's who I came to work with initially. And I was either so good as a update guy or so bad as a producer that by the time I was ready to go back and get my stuff and move everything down to Jacksonville, they said, you know what, I think we're going to hire a producer for this show. I'll let you decide which one is the truth there. But yeah, Rick Ballou, and then later Heath Klein came in. And so a lot of folks who had worked a little bit in radio. It was a pretty young group. And in fact, one time, maybe a month into this thing, I'm in the newsroom, the WOKV newsroom, and one of the anchors, Roxy Tyler, says, "Oh, these kids running around here. And who is this Cole Pepper anyway?" I said, "That's me." And she said,
That's great.
So we were probably a little bit of a menace in a building of 5 radio stations with a lot of veterans, with all these 20-somethings running around talking sports.
Now, you, of course, did some pregame and postgame for the Jaguars.
Yep.
How did that come about in the scheme of things at the Ball, or how did that work?
Yeah, the Ball launched in late October, early November '96, and that's when the Jaguars started going on that run, and of course wound up going to the playoffs. Bill Riley was doing the pregame, postgame those first 2 years. He was also the morning show host, and he wanted to be able to travel with to cover the team in away games.
He was doing that on the Ball.
On the Ball.
Okay.
Yeah, and so the Jaguars said, well, listen, you can either travel and cover them, or you can host pregame, postgame. You can't do both because the team playing, we're not going to wait for you.
Right.
And we're not really set up to do the post game that way. So Bill decided he wanted to go and cover the team on the road, and so after he made that decision, I got a call from Brian Sexton a couple of days later saying, "Hey, do you want to do this?" And I was like, "Heck yes!" So there I was, it was right around my 24th birthday, and I found myself on an NFL broadcast.
Right, doing the pre and post game on the Ball.
On the Ball and on the entire Jaguars radio network.
Now, that lasted for a while, and then the Ball, as you understand it, the Ball cut a bunch of people or something.
Yeah, in those days there was a lot of radio stations being bought and sold, and we went through about 6 different ownership groups in maybe the course of 4 years.
That's part of broadcasting.
Yeah, and especially you had deregulation, and there was a lot of movement and different companies owning. The Ball was sold to Radio Disney, so the group that would become Cox Media sold it, and so now we don't have a sports station anymore, and they decided to keep me on as the sports director at WOKV, still doing the Jaguars pre and post game because the games were still on, and OKV was still the partner with the Jaguars. So that decision, I mean, so many things that happen in your career are as a result of being in a place where somebody else makes a decision and then it comes to you. And Bill making that decision to travel to those games kept me in Jacksonville now for 20-some years.
From what you remember, can he resume that role?
He can do that. The question is not can he do that. It's the question, can he only do that?
Okay.
Nobody doubts Tom Coughlin as a football coach.
Right.
Great football coach. He's going to be in the Hall of Fame.
the big picture vision guy, which he was.
This is where your relationship with Pete Banaszak came about.
So that actually started in '97, the first year I was doing the post-game show, and the former Raider, current great. I still have people who tell me that they would pull into their driveway, pull into to the garage after the game, and stay in their car, hoping with the garage door open, with listening to our post, because they want to hear what Banaszak had to say. So that's one of the most fun and one of the easiest jobs I ever had. I just lobbed softballs to Pete. I knew I could always get him going on talking about kickers, talking about officials, and talking about running routes short of the first down marker on third down.
He was great. You had to love working with him.
It was great, and Pete was just wonderful. And despite the fact that I grew up in Kansas City, he played for the Raiders. You know, that great rivalry.
Yeah, right,
but,
definitely.
We had a great time working together.
How long did that last? How long did you work with Pete?
Let's see. I think Pete at one point decided he wanted to kind of pull back, so we brought Marco Coleman in to do the post game. And I'd have to think back from a year's standpoint. That was something in probably around 2009, 2010, something in that range when Pete started pulling back. And there was a break in there. There was one season when I wasn't on the Jaguars broadcast in that run, and that was after OKV decided, when the economy tanked, that they wanted to pare back some of the the payroll. So they let me go, and so I went and worked for 1010XL, and I brought Pete on the post game show with me there. So it was either Pete or Tony Baselli working with the post-game show with me, which was
now
great.
when you were with Pete, you were doing some other things. I think I can't keep track of it, and I don't know how you did. JU Tomcats, you were doing some stuff with them.
I did. So at first it was a lot of side gigs through the years.
Right.
Back before a side gig was a thing, I just wanted to work.
I know you had to keep a calendar to know where you were going.
I had to know, and it got busy sometimes. So I did play-by-play for the Jacksonville Tomcats. Did play-by-play for JU, football, baseball, basketball for 5 years. Did play-by-play for the Suns for, I think, 3 seasons, including the season when Gabe Kapler was the minor league baseball player of the year. That was a 98, 99, 2000. Mixed in some Jacksonville Sharks, Bulls, high school. So all throughout the years while I've had these, my main job, I've also had these side jobs, most of them with play-by-play, because truly, that's what I really enjoy the most is being there when the game's going on and the energy in the stadium.
You mentioned the economy tanked in 2008, and you were with OKV, and there were cuts there.
Yeah.
Tell me what happened there.
Unceremoniously brought in and told, we're letting you go. And I do love this. I was told, we're not firing you. I said, oh, so am I still working here? Well, no. Okay. So some of the semantics, fired, it's we're reducing staff, and so they did that. Thankfully, I had built up enough, credibility in the market that it didn't take too long before I wound up catching on with 1010.
Then you went from 1010. 1010 had started another sports radio.
Yes.
You went to 1010 to do what?
I was back as the update guy and chime-in guy, a co-host of the afternoon show with, at that time, Frank Franchi and Rick Ballou. So reunited, and it feels so good. And then also did a Sunday morning show with looking back on the Gators game from the previous day and the Jaguars pregame and postgame show.
So you were still doing the Jags pre and postgame show with
for 1010. It was it wasn't the official.
They weren't the official station then. Who was the official station?
That was still OKV.
OKV.
Yeah.
Okay, so you were doing it for 1010XL.
Yeah.
They're on their own thing.
Yeah.
Okay, Shad Khan comes in and buys the Jags.
Well, let's not get to that far yet.
Okay.
Because I go back to the Jags the next season. Wayne Weaver still owns the team.
Right.
They decided that they wanted me back, which was great, that the Jaguars wanted me back. They tried to find a way to make it work and brought me in. And so I was kind of working in-house, selling some sponsorship, which was tough when the team was going 2-14 in those days.
Right. Glenn Fisher told me how tough it was to sell tickets.
Yes.
He was a season ticket holder, salesman then.
Yeah, and so those days taught me an awful lot about things I didn't have a lot of experience to that point, selling sponsorships and making those partnerships.
Important to just win, baby.
Yes, no doubt about it. That helped, but that can't be. you just have to adjust your expectations and your approach, I think, when that's happening.
Okay, so you're doing that. So
Yeah.
then Shad Khan comes
Yeah.
along and buys a team.
Yeah.
And then what for you?
Then they decide they're going in a different direction. Not fired.
You were let go or fired with the 1 day notice. You told me.
One day notice. I had a contract that ran out on April the 30th.
We said going in a new direction. What do you mean? They wanted to change people?
Yeah. So, so you never. Most of the time, if you're not fired for cause, you're not told why. Why the decision's really made.
Right.
But
you'd had experience with it.
But I had and it's
changing the business.
Right. And honestly, those times give you an opportunity to really reflect on where you are and where you want to be.
The offense has struggled, but it was in bad weather against the Jets, in a game against Houston, it didn't really matter, and then against a tough physical run defense in the Titans. I like the Jaguars offense to bounce back. Jamal, Jana, I've got the Jaguars winning a close one, 27-20.
Got to be a little tough, though. I mean, here you are, you're working, and then boom, one day you got nothing.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, in the impact, the concern and the anxiety of, all right, where's the next paycheck coming from? That matters.
Right.
But every time that I've been let go from a job, it has given me a good chance to sit back, because you can get so in the weeds with this job. It's every day. Sometimes you need to step back and get a little, all right, well, what do I really want now? Because you kind of, once you get into a job, for the most part, it takes you where the job is going to go. And sometimes you're don't have as big an influence on that as somebody, in a news director's office or a general manager's office. So fine. Now you get to a point, where do I want to be? And what do I want to do? And how can I do that?
But they came calling then. You didn't want you the 1 day notice. You were out of there, but people started to call you.
Yeah. So I did a little bit of work with I was doing side work still there, doing things like Bulls high school football.
But if I understand that, Barry Milligan called you about the Bulls job after that was 2 weeks later, is what you told me.
Yeah, it was pretty much 2 weeks later. And Barry, who I've known basically since I've been in town,
right?
He did a weekend show on the Ball back in the day. The Bear Facts was always a hit, and then did JU later. And he said, "Listen, things have come up, and the Bulls doesn't have a play-by-play guy. Would you like to do that?" I said, "Heck yes, of course."
That's what you like the best.
I love doing play-by-play. And so that opportunity, I would not necessarily have sought out high school football play-by-play. When I was, in 1996, that might not have been something I looked for. But having gotten a little bit more exposure to it, knowing how important it is in our community, and knowing that the opportunity that Bulls had, I jumped at it. It was great.
And
Corky Rogers is the head coach.
You got to know the legendary Corky, and then the Mac Jones, the starting quarterback for the Patriots.
Mac Jones was the quarterback on that team. Interestingly enough, Dexter Carter Jr. was a star on one of those early teams, and his dad, Dexter Carter,
played at my alma mater, Seminole, and 49er,
had been on the Tomcats. Did some broadcasting with him. I still have a photo of Dexter and I on the stage of the old Coliseum, sitting in front of a table, ready to call an arena football game.
Yeah.
So that was a great experience to do that, and did those games for 5 years. And again, it was a side job, but something that I took a lot of pride in.
Then the Armada came into the mix.
Yeah. So
the soccer team.
Around I think it was late in 2013, we started to hear rumblings that Jacksonville might get a pro soccer team. And in 2014, or maybe late 2013, they were awarded to Jacksonville. And so in 2014, I came on board as sort of a consultant early on, and with knowing that I was going to do the play-by-play and be the director of broadcasting and to help put the broadcasting department together. And one of the things that I learned about there was that it underlined that I really love working from a blank whiteboard. I love to go in and say, all right, here's where we want to be, here's where we are, how do we get there? And I was able to build up that broadcasting department to the point where the league called it the template for other teams
really?
from a broadcasting
It's
standpoint.
something you really had never done, but obviously you did it well.
Yeah,
it had to be a blast.
It was great, and unfortunately then the NASL had trouble. They got sideways with U.S. Soccer. The team was sold, and
but you did that for 3 seasons.
Three
you broadcast
seasons,
3
15,
seasons.
16,
okay.
17.
You love baseball. You love basketball, football. Soccer's another world.
Yeah.
How'd you learn to broadcast that?
Well, so I had grown up playing soccer, so I had some exposure
what'd you play?
there. Mostly midfield.
Okay.
Occasionally, I would play in the goal. If
In
needed.
Jacksonville, I played in ninth grade. I played on the only public soccer team, public school soccer team, or maybe there were two in Jacksonville, because soccer was not a big deal then. But you had played some,
Yeah.
so that helped you.
That helped, and had been in Kansas City before the now Sporting KC or the Wizards came up. The indoor soccer was huge in Kansas City in the 80s, so that was a big thing. So I knew the game a bit. I have friends who were in soccer, and I leaned on them a lot to sort of figure that out. Then the great thing is now you can watch so much soccer on television, where back in the early 90s, you really couldn't. You had to have a satellite dish to get it. So now having that access to be able to see that, you sort of model your broad. You say, all right, what is it from a TV broadcast? What are they doing here? So if you look at my early broadcasts from 2015 and compared to 2017, I hope you would see a big change in how to broadcast soccer, because it did not come as naturally to me as baseball did, because you sit there listening to 162 baseball games a year on your radio, and it just sort of seeps into you as a kid.
Hello and welcome into Armada Kickoff, and happy St. Patrick's Day. We're in the middle of a busy week for the boys in blue. Tuesday night they played at JU, and tomorrow at 10 it's a meeting with Rio OKC at Patton Park. We'll have highlights from Tuesday night and a look ahead to the first ever meeting with the NASL expansion.
That had to be fun and a challenge,
It was great.
and you loved that.
Loved it. It kind of felt like there was a piece of my brain that got recharged because it hadn't been. Now you got to learn the new thing, which I think is another benefit. When you lose a job, sometimes you learn a new thing, and it kind of reinvigorates you.
Right. Okay, now then eventually you come to Channel 4.
So,
how did
yeah.
that happen? Of course, filling in you told me filling in with at 12 on the weekends, like back in the not Kavaris, but Hicken and Prosser.
Yep.
You were doing that. Then you were filling in as well for Sam, and then at 4, so they knew you. You would come and do the weekends there, but you ended up full time at 4. How did that come about?
Yeah, so from 2005 when I was filling in, it was mostly weekends and holidays and that sort of thing where I would fill in, and I would go in there and again had a great opportunity to learn an awful lot from Sam and from Kevin Talley and Matt Kingston, who were there, and others who worked at the station, Sean Woodland, and I could go on. But to learn a little bit each time, and then you go away, well, you can't apply what you've learned enough. So I started with the Armada. I was on every week with a studio show, so that helped me hone that a little bit, that performance side of it a little bit better.
Right.
And then there was a job open at Channel 4 for a web producer. And because the Armada had decided that they just were going to have me as just broadcast the games, we weren't going to have me on the office staff, I had now more flexibility in my day. And I thought, I called up Catherine Bonfield, the news director, and said, hey, I see you have this position open. Is that something that maybe I could do? And she goes, I would never have thought of that. And
and they had an excellent website. Steve Patrick put that together from day one. We did one of these with Steve, and so they had one of the best websites in television, really. And you were in on, for you got to be a part of that.
Yeah, it was great. And working with Steve was fantastic. Such a great guy, and he had been there from the beginning and had built up News 4 Jax.
And you were still filling in on sports on the weekend when the chance came.
Yeah, and
when the opening come up in your calendar that you had to keep.
Exactly. Thank goodness for cell phones now. I can just put it in the phone and it gives me a reminder.
Yeah.
So again, a lot. That was the first time that I was doing something that was completely out of sports for my main job. You know, I'd done some other things where it was in sports marketing or this or that, but that was so now I'm doing a lot more. Some sports, but news was the main thing, which gave me an appreciation for doing sports, because that's really what I like to do. There were some interesting things in there as well, and learning about sort of not early stages, but mid stages of the website and some of the streaming things that were happening at that point was great. And then, but it was sort of a holding position because they wanted to bring me in to sports at some point, and then they finally did.
Right, and at some point, I guess, Sam Kavaris, a longtime sportscaster there, had been there forever, ended up leaving Channel 4 over inability to get a contract or whatever happened, and then you kind of moved into that role, Monday through Friday doing the sports. How did that happen?
Well, it just as you say, they had a different expectation for what they wanted out of that position, I think, so Sam didn't take the offer. He mentioned you could probably find Sam's session he had with you here on YouTube somewhere. And so they brought me in, and it was a different position, truly. They were really changed. They wanted to do things much differently with sports than they were doing before.
Right.
But I was, as you mentioned, 5 days a week. Really, it was a Sunday through Thursday in the off season, and during football season, it was Sunday, Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Sunday, sometimes a Saturday.
Right.
With football.
You had to have a calendar, but
Exactly.
but the Jags were a big part of that coverage
Yep.
that you did. So that was why Sundays and all that you were on that.
Exactly. Yeah. And of course, high school football, which continued to be very big at that point, and doing that Friday night show every week, and being out at a high school football game every week, loved it. Again, that was being there where the energy is, where the game's important for the people who are watching. That's what really.
That's a high
excites me.
adrenaline half hour. Those high
yeah.
school.
Oh, yes,
all
as you
things,
know,
and the
and
stress and getting
games
the
become-
games in, the highlights, and get the play by play. It's really.
There were many a time. There were many a time, Bubba, you've been through this, where I'm standing up there on set, waiting to, we've got the Creekside Bartram Trail game here, and I know next it's the Mandarin Fletcher game, and we don't have the shot sheet, the highlights from Mandarin Fletcher, and
For you to say
and
what's
I may
happening.
know the quarterback and a receiver or something, but I don't know everybody on every team, so
Oh,
it's
man.
hard to ad-lib that. And then somebody comes running in and hands it to you like that, and there you go. It was stressful, but it was a lot of fun.
The other teams, in addition to Bulls, who will play for a spot in state championship games coming up from our area, Ware County in Georgia, and in Florida, Union County. You've got Bradford, who's going to play for a title, UC as well.
So 4 years, that had to be good times. So working at Channel 4, that's a great place, and one of the top stations in the country, really. That
Yep.
had to be good, and you had to learn something. But again, it may be stressful, and like you said, maybe the more people would know.
So 5 years, some of that in the COVID years too. Remember, so that was an added level of stress. A little bit before COVID hit, my daughter was born. So here I am, an older dad, and have a daughter who, as we tape this, is 4 years old. So spent maybe half of her life in sort of pandemic environment and working from home and trying all these things. And I really realized how important. I knew it conceptually, but you learn it in your heart how important it is to be around for those years when the kids were young. And working until midnight every night was not conducive to that.
Oh, yeah.
Because then you're dragging, you're tired every day,
Right.
and you're trying to catch up.
I know that drill, definitely.
You've
So
been there.
you did it for 4 years at 4, and then you decided to leave Channel 4 and kind of work like a regular hours.
Sort of, a semi-regular.
Yeah.
And so joined on with Jacks USL, the group that's bringing pro men's and women's soccer to town to help them develop their broadcast relationships and some sponsorship
And
stuff
that team's hopes to hit and play when?
Probably the women's team probably play 2025 in the fall, and then the men probably play in 2026 spring. They'll play a spring to fall schedule.
And plans for a stadium in
They'll be
Jacksonville.
building a stadium in town, and I think it's going to be fantastic. It'll be the first time there's ever been a professional women's sports franchise of any kind in Jacksonville. And as a girl dad, that's something that really excites me.
Tim Tebow's part of this too.
Tebow's part of the ownership group, right?
You've, I guess, got to know him a lot better.
A little bit. He hasn't been in the office every day for at all, but having been around Tim and talked to him, and now you see him in a setting where it's not just on the football field. You can see why people are drawn to him so much, just the way he goes about, the way he interacts.
Right. So it's unusual. So you're working for Jacks today, writing. Mm-hmm. You did some writing, so you're doing some writing for them for sports.
Yep, and that's kept me in with writing Jaguars coverage throughout the course of the week, and also doing some work for Sirius XM on game days, which I've done for the
Multiple
last several
sports
years.
gigs still.
It's when I was working at Channel 4, that was one of the rare times I didn't have a ton of other side jobs.
Right. You just worked for 4.
Because it took up that much focus.
That was a full-time job.
Full-time. There are some jobs that are full-time that you can have some side hustles to. That's a full-time job. So I'm sort of getting back to my roots now of doing a lot of different things.
Unusual to stay in a market for a long time. I did. I mean, I was originally from here, but once you got here, pretty much almost out of college, you've stayed here. You had to love broadcasting in Jacksonville.
Yeah, I have. There was one time where I was tempted. They were starting up a sports radio station in Kansas City,
Ooh.
and I had the chance to go back there. And honest to God, it was a coin flip. And it took me 3 or 4 days of just grinding over it, trying to figure out what I was going to do. And I was single at the time, so I didn't have family to be concerned with. I would have been gone back closer to my family. And in the end, it was about a $5,000 thing. I told them, listen, this is what I need to say yes to this job. If you can say yes to this job at this dollar figure, I'm yours. And they came up to within $5,000. They were still negotiating. I was done negotiating. I don't think they realized it. They hired somebody else. 9 months later, they fired him. So who knows what would have happened and what my career path would have been as a result. But it's been great being in Jacksonville and being able to be a part of all these great Jaguars moments and the Gate River Run and the Players Championship.
Yeah, I was going to say, what
Georgia,
makes
Florida.
Jacksonville special about it for you? You're broadcasting in the city the whole time. What makes Jacksonville so special?
I think Jacksonville, Jacksonville to me is a city that is made up of a lot of neighborhoods. Each neighborhood has its own vibe, and each school has its own community around that, and it sort of is the same way. So to be able to interact with people on one level, the high school sports level, and you talk to somebody from, Atlantic Coast or somebody from Ponte Vedra or somebody from West Nassau, it's a different experience that they're all having, and it's great to learn that and be able to understand what's happening in the city. At the same time, if you start talking about the Jaguars, it's everybody. So you get the small picture, you get the big picture. The weather doesn't hurt.
College sports, JU, you were involved in that?
There have been a lot of opportunities. I've probably worked for almost everybody in town now. So I may be running out of options.
That's why
at this
you're a
point.
media icon, my friend.
That's all it takes. Work for everybody.
Work for everybody.
One of the other issues with the Jaguars is, we're trying to assess positions. We've talked a lot about the quarterback position. We're trying to assess the GM and the coach. But I also think it's important to assess where the fan base is in terms of embracing.
What advice would you give to students that are young people that want to get into broadcasting?
I'll give you 3 bits here. 1, work on your writing. And the only way to get better as a writer is to write and have somebody else analyze what you're doing. There's writing for broadcast, there's writing for print, there's writing creatively. The more you write, the better writer you're likely to be, but you have to have purposeful practice in this and be able to find somebody who can help you with the writing. Number 2, show up. Being there is such a big thing. When I was trying to find my way into this business, I would go anywhere I could where I thought I could help out, volunteer, just be around, be known. You have to sacrifice something to gain something. And sacrificing some time on the weekend, rather than being with your buddies or going out on a date, sometimes that time spent on a weekend at a game somewhere develops a relationship that's going to make a difference down the road. Because 3, in all business, but in sports, I think more than any other that I've been involved in, relationships matter. Who you know matters. Who knows they can trust you matters. So develop those relationships. And now with email and social media and everything else, LinkedIn, there's no reason you can't continue to develop those relationships with people you meet as a young aspiring broadcaster, because it may not be that person who makes the hiring decision on a job you want, but they may know somebody, and their recommendation can go a long way.
I know this question's come out of left field, but what's your go-to story in your career? One of your top memories, or 1 or 2 memories that stand out the most?
So, one of the things I love about covering sports is seeing people overcome obstacles. And one of the stories that I continue to cover in one way or another is about a local runner named Mark Burgett, who is, I think, the most incredible athlete that I've covered in Jacksonville.
You know about this because you told me you're doing a runner's podcast,
Yes.
right?
Yeah,
okay. There's another job.
Yeah, exactly. And Mark started running later in life, started running long runs, and he started training for the Donna because his wife was going through breast cancer treatment. So he would train and he would run around his block so many times, thousands of times in training leading up to running the Donna. So he enters, I think it was the 2nd marathon he'd ever run, the Donna, and he runs it and he wins it while his wife is recovering from breast cancer treatment.
Wow.
And he wins it. And then the next year, he won the Donna Ultra, running 110 miles over 2 days.
Oh, yeah.
He's won the Keys 100-mile race. He's run the Spartathlon in Greece, running from Athens to Sparta. He is just unbelievable. The way he trains, what he can push his body through. He told me this one time. I said, how is it that, when you go out for a run, anybody who's a runner knows there's a point in any long run where your body or your mind or something in you says, we should back off or it's going to hurt. I said, how do you get past that? Most people would say, well, you try to ignore it, disassociate from it, hum a song to yourself, it's positive self-talk, something, whatever it might be. Mark says, I embrace it. I know that if I'm hurting like this, just imagine what those other guys are doing. Right. That confidence, well-born confidence, for a guy who is one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet is an amazing story. And I love to be able to, I saw Mark at a race here a couple weeks ago and talked to him. I love to tell his story because it's just phenomenal. By the way, his wife has beaten breast cancer.
Okay, I was
so
going to ask
happy
about
story,
her. Right.
Happy ending to that
and
story.
He's from Jacksonville.
He's from Jacksonville.
He's from one of these neighborhoods, I assume.
Yeah, and he just keeps running. He ran a 50-50 where he and a partner ran 50 miles together recently, and he's looking for some other big long races.
Does he go all over the place doing this?
Oh yeah. He's
Wow.
remarkable.
It is amazing the people you meet in this business.
Yeah.
People that are just great people. You mentioned a couple on it, Mac Jones at Bowles and Corky and many people. Pete Banaszak, the list goes on.
Yeah, and that's ultimately, you talk about what stories do you remember. It's not the story, it's the person involved with the story that really stays with it. That when you've done these stories and you remember them, social media makes it easy to keep in touch, or just send in a text from time to time. It's great. You learn so much more about what makes our community such a great community.
Yeah. Well, Cole, I'm glad you came to Jacksonville and you stayed here, and it's been great listening to you over the years, and you're still involved.
Thank
Good
you
luck.
so much.
Thanks for coming.